Everybody likes to talk about cybersecurity and IT, and I finally gotten to the point where I can spell IT. So my name is Mike Powers. I work at Intermountain Healthcare. We're the north half of the Rocky Mountain West, and Banner's the southern half. We're the northern half. We got about 6 states worth of hospitals, as well as a solar panel company for respiratory health, and airplane company for moving patients around, and several other companies you might have heard of. Teleca is our outpatient imaging. We're getting ready to open branches in New Hampshire. So when you think of the Rocky Mountain West, you always think of New Hampshire. I know I do. At Intermountain Health, I'm the director of clinical engineering for field service. So we got several directors that tend to have a state or two. My role tends to be all of the fussy equipment that you don't have somebody in the building taking care of, but I've got a crew of folks in vans that populate several states and traverse from Las Vegas to Boise and Billings down to Denver. So it's fun. In March of 23, the Health Sector Coordinating Council published Managing Legacy Technology Security. So it's the Health Industry Cybersecurity Managing Legacy Technology Security, HICMAL. It's kind of a fun title. Who are the HSCC? Well, Health and Human Services has a division called Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Something like 90% of healthcare revenue comes through Medicare and Medicaid. That comes through patients that are over 65. About 60% comes to Medicare and Medicaid. So Health and Human Services driving Medicare and Medicaid, they've got a dog in the fight. The Health Sector Coordinating Council is the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee to Health and Human Services. It's a public-private partnership. Unlike most federal advisory committees, it's not required to publish its minutes because cybersecurity, right? But if you're interested, please look up the Health Sector Coordinating Council. They're always seeking new members. It's free to join. They always have a lot of work to be done. This is one of the standards we put together. It's an advisory document for making that a little bit better. Previously, they published a document called Model Contract Language for Cybersecurity. So if you're like, wow, how do I get them to tell me something's going to be end of life more than 45 days before it's end of life? Put it in your T's and C's for your contracts, right? Well, Model Contract Language is another document that the HSCC has out there, and you might have even heard of the 405D effort. Congress put together a requirement for cybersecurity, and 405D was an effort to create a comprehensive how-to for small hospitals or large and medium hospitals. So 405D is a component of Health Sector Coordinating Council, as well as the Joint Security Plan, JSP. So they've got lots of information. If you like this cybersecurity shtick, if you can also spell IT or want to, HSCC is a good place to get involved or to get free documentation. What's this presentation going to be about? It's kind of a book report. We spent 3 years writing this document. It's 115 pages. It took 3 years for the FDA, myself, Electa, to lead a team of about 35 folks who met twice a week for 3 years to cobble together a lot of the problems with legacy technology, and then propose some solutions, or at least kind of give it some framework around what that could look like. 115, that's a lot, right? So what are we talking about? If we take a step back and think about cybersecurity of medical equipment, and we think about what that really means, then maybe I'm a hospital participant and I really need to be involved. Maybe I'm a manufacturer and I really need to be involved. Maybe I'm a third-party ISO. I really need to be involved because I have clients who are concerned about our cybersecurity. This document was written by all three groups for all three groups. So some of the stuff we covered would be maybe I don't want to bring in stuff that's already legacy. Who's ever bought a piece of equipment and it shows up on the loading dock and it's got 30 days left before the operating system is supported, right? Well, let's not do that. How do we stop and catch ourselves before that becomes a thing? Maybe I want to take things that aren't a legacy device yet, and let's keep them not for just a little bit longer, right? So the first thing that we stopped and thought about with legacy technology was, are we talking devices or technology? And the final answer we came up with is we're really talking about technologies. This is not just a infusion pump. It's not just a CT. It could be an HVAC system. It could be AI that's used for your radiologists to do checks against their readings. So there's lots of technologies that are out there, not just hold it in your hand devices. So that was one of the things and why this talks about technology, not devices. The other thing is, what the heck is legacy anyway? According to the International Medical Device Regulators Forum, it's a big name, International Medical Device Regulators Forum, a legacy device is one where the risk cannot be mitigated appropriately. What is appropriately? What is mitigated? Depends on the person reading it. So maybe that means, oh my gosh, never, ever, 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 ever is there a risk. Maybe that means it's a acceptable risk for my organization. I mean, you wouldn't spend $20,000 on a safe to protect $10,000 in cash. So there's a risk reward in there. You got to balance the risk versus the reward. So non-legacy technologies would be technologies that are not at that risk step off yet. Probably have supported software, probably have supported internal components. Also, what if we could protect legacy stuff that, you know, we already have? Maybe we should make smart risk-informed decisions about whether we need to replace something, or maybe it still does the clinical job that it was purchased to do, and you shouldn't replace a 6-year-old device just because the operating system is no longer supported if you could mitigate that risk. So how do you make smart risk-informed decisions to deal with the fact that you can't replace everything as soon as the software goes unsupported? SBOMs. SBOMs are a fun catchphrase that caught a lot of attention lately. Software bill of materials is what SBOM stands for. You look on the side of your box of cereal in the morning, it has a list of ingredients. Well, what if your medical technology had a list of all the software components? Not only does it have Windows 10, but it's got Adobe Acrobat 11.2, it's got Java 6.3, it's got all of these software components in there. And a lot of them are no longer supported, not just Windows. All these other things that could be in there, your box of ingredients. So SBOMs are that list, software bill of materials list of software that's in your device. Manufacturers are required to document what goes into your medical equipment, so they have a master device record. If you ever wonder what's in my machine, you can call them and ask, and they can tell you what they put in there because they had to write it down. There are new requirements around SBOMs. The FDA helped draft these. The president has an executive order. The omnibus bill that came out from Congress at the end of the year for funding for 23 said, look, one of the caveats in here, it's like thousands of pages long, how many must go, but one of the caveats in here is SBOMs are required. The FDA has the authority to mandate that. Tag your it, FDA figured out yet 90 days. So in March, the FDA really started issuing rulings about SBOMs and what you had to do to submit a device for a new 510K for FDA approval and clearance to be sold.
Is there a repository?
Is there what?
A repository.
For SBOMs?
Yeah.
So almost. Right now, HISAC, which is Health Information Sharing Council, HISAC, and most HDOs are probably a member, is putting together a subscription-based SBOM library. So they've got some early adopters among manufacturers, and they've got some early adopters among owners of equipment. And so they are trying to pursue that and be the source of truth, as it were. I know there are some third-party software companies out there that will help with if you're doing pre-purchase planning and you want to look at, hey, we are considering buying a product A or product B. Can you tell us about these two and their cybersecurity robustness? There are companies out there that can do that as well. I'm not going to advocate for one or the other, but private purchasing companies that can do that, as well as HISAC is putting together a subscription-based thing. So yes, soon. What's up?
Is there a standard template? Yes.
There are 3. Not only one, there are 3. The 2 that are most likely used are called Cyclone DX and SPDX. Both of those will effectively give you an Excel sheet with certain fields mapped to what are the components of each software entity. So what version of Windows 10 is it? When was it created? Who was the publisher? These sorts of things, last update. Those 4 or 5 characteristics about each one are then listed, and you'll have a whole Excel sheet with blocks and blocks and blocks of information. So yes, but they're competing right now, depending on a lot of things. They're still trying to come to an answer. The neat thing that's going to get folded in on the back of those is, so we now know what software you've got. That's great, but who cares? How do you know when it's no longer going to work for you? What if it's got a hole, needs to be patched? Wouldn't it be great if there was a vulnerability exchange that told you, hey, not only does your machine have this piece of software, but it's got a vulnerability to read-write from the CD-ROM drive. You know what? That would be great to be disclosed in a VEX, but most medical equipment doesn't have a CD-ROM drive read-write capability. So it's a vulnerability in the software, but it's irrelevant because it doesn't exist in the device. So the next step after SBOM will actually be VEX, which is going to say, yes, there's a vulnerability. Does it apply or not to your machine? And you can spell out some of that in your contractual terms if you use model contract language. All kinds of fun happiness that's going on in that world. What if I want to support customers in managing technologies so that they stay non-legacy for as long as possible? It can be a manufacturer's decision. That can be a third-party ISO's decision. And what if I want to design, deploy, maintain secure and securable technology? So let's not just buy, off-the-shelf computers and install them in our cath lab imaging equipment. Let's make them in a way that they are more secure. So instead of, instead of having to sell a $20,000 upgrade to get a new computer and a new software for one of your products, what if there was a way to design machines so that you just told the hospital, you need a machine that has this bus speed, this much memory, this operating system, and then the hospital could maintain the computers. And that whole every 3 to 5 years headache that comes along could be avoided. So what if there's a way to design stuff in a more secure manner? That's also discussed at length in here. Oddly enough, HICMALs help all that stuff. So if we want to avoid buying old stuff, like you really don't want that time when there's an announced end of life for Windows 10 in 14 months, give or take. It would stink if you said, oh my gosh, in 24, we're going to buy a new technology. It's going to come with Windows 10, and 14 months from now, Windows 10 isn't supported. Should we put automatic upgrade to Windows 11 when available in the purchasing contract? Heck yeah. Should, hey, calling that out is a good idea? HICMALs. Probably even says it on page 11. How do I make sure that I understand what characteristics technology might have so that I know if it might be legacy, right? So there probably are a lot less Windows headaches in Philips monitors, but we might have other problems like network cards. Network cards have software on them. We had a huge vulnerability in the last 8 months where just having certain network cards allowed bad actors access to your equipment. So not only knowing operating system, but then some of the other components as well. How do you develop a strategy around technology acquisition and maintenance? Making sure that you're purchasing stuff that's not going to become legacy overnight, and your maintenance cycle. How do you take care of things? Who applies patches and when? Do you have fully contracted with the manufacturer and they apply patches once a year? What if the patch was applied here on Halloween and then Microsoft came out with a new urgent patch the 2nd of November, and you go, oh my gosh, I need that one now too. And well, I have them on 1 p.m. Can you get the manufacturer to come back? What does a good maintenance strategy look like? Again, covered. How do I negotiate contracts to address legacy risk? Well, you should be told if there is a vulnerability. 30 days after, as soon as it's discovered, they have 30 days to tell you. And that is FDA best practice. But aside from that, who has time to go and check 3,000, I've got 3,000 vendors, who has time to go check all of those vendors' websites and see, did they disclose it publicly that they've got a vulnerability? No, man, reach out to me, send me an email, let me know. I'm never gonna have time to go to every vendor's website and check. So how do you contractually make sure that you spell some of that out so that you're not, oh my gosh, do I need to go check Polaris and Philips and Siemens and I don't know, let's just have a million different manufacturers, all of their websites to find out if the latest and greatest problem applies. And then how do you assess all that? How do you know if it's really a problem? Well, if it's a CD-ROM drive, maybe not as big a problem. Maybe if it's a network interface card, maybe slightly bigger problem. If you know your average 13-year-old sitting in the lobby of the certain department in the hospital could find a hotspot and could find that device on the network and oh my gosh, it could go have fun with it. Trying to evaluate the risk and proximity is one of those things, but how easy is it to get to and do your devices get subnetted off into their own subnet, so on and so forth. One of the things I like about segmentation of a network, you've probably heard that term a lot. Most cybersecurity attacks are not some really smart person in another country trying to get into your hospital's cath lab number 2. It's just not that. It's not that done that way. Most cybersecurity attacks are automated. There's a computer and it sends out 1 million emails. There's a computer with virus on it and it's sending out a million contact things, automate. Automated stuff, if it gets onto your network, automated stuff will not jump from one subnet to the next. It doesn't make the jump well. So just by having a dedicated subnet of your network for medical equipment, that can help with a lot of your automated attacks and address the fact that, oh, we've got a firewall. That's not the panacea you want it to be. Recommendations are addressed in this as well as acquiring technologies to avoid risk. Maybe we want to manage stuff that we've got that's not legacy yet. You keep it non-legacy for as long as possible. So what all does that mean? Oh my gosh, probably means all kinds of fun, groovy things. How do you make sure you know and understand and you're acting on the technology's ages? I've got a brand new thing. The darn thing came into the work Windows 10, and it's going to be legacy in 14 months. It's not old, not legacy, it's 14 months old, but oh my gosh, that's something to consider. I've got a 15-year-old cath lab running Windows XP, and it's not on the network. So I'm much less concerned about attack if it's not on the network. So there are things that you are maybe in a research environment that may have different concerns, whether they're legacy or not. How do you take care of stuff to make sure they're secure as long as possible? We kind of already talked about that one. How do I implement technologies in your environment to manage legacy risks? Well, one of the things that we do is at my hospital system is device comes in the door and we have a cybersecurity team that's part and parcel of clinical engineering. And this cybersecurity team says, before you put it on the network, let's change the default password. Let's close ports 1, 2, 4, and 5. Let's make sure that it only talks to packs and work list. Let's make sure that it has these characteristics of a secure device. And that way it's implemented on our network in a responsible way. And we write a implementation document for every make and model. Hand them to the installation engineer and say, you guys love your machine, really glad you're here, really want it set up, calibrated, and given to the nurse so they can do patients in 3 minutes. Let's make it 4 and implement it correctly. So how do we put things on the network in a responsible way? Talk about managing things so that we don't take on those risks. And then how do you keep up with patches? Oh my gosh, patches are important, right? Everybody wants patches, that's the answer to everything. What if they aren't? What if the patch that's applied does something like removes access to accounts that need the administrator password? What if you're taking care of the service and you're not the manufacturer and you need the administrator password? How do you not apply that certain patch? So some patches you may want, some you may not. The risk being something that you need to take on and understand the environment you're in.
I had a quick question on the patching.
Totally, what you got?
Yeah. So when you apply the patches, aren't supposed to be approved by the vendor?
Yes. So if you are changing the form or function of a device and how the software operates is one of the things. For example, you wouldn't want it to run a certain process in the middle of the case that causes the processor to slow down 100%. Right when you need instant reliability for exposure buttons or whatever. Applying patches that they need to be approved by the FAA. If it is just a security patch, the vulnerability does not change how the machine operates, there is some gray in the rules that allows you to apply strict security patches with no impact on functioning of the device. Consult with your manufacturers, consult with FDA. Make sure you stop and you read some of their guidance that's out there. For the most part, it's going to change the function of the device should be approved. If it is not changing the function of the device, it's functionally equivalent, a little bit more legal. But you take on that risk yourself. If it does, in fact, turn out to have some impact to you. You do have the right to refuse patches. You may not want to. So we're trying to protect stuff. How do you identify a potential legacy technology? Well, everything will become legacy at some point. So you just kind of walk in the door and go. Seriously, the risk for some devices is higher, has more software entities in it. If it has more discrete components in it, the larger the number, the more opportunities to fail. It's like having a car with crank down windows versus electric windows. For the longest time, electric windows were very reliable and they broke all the time, and more features, more opportunities to break. Same kind of idea. How do you decide how much risk you can handle? Get your risk department involved. Don't make that choice on your own. Just don't be that person. But one of the key tasks, one of the key perspectives that a lot of IT folks have is that example from the beginning of you wouldn't spend $20,000 on a safe to protect $10,000 in cash. You wouldn't spend $10,001 to protect $10,000 in cash. So kind of what's the risk versus reward? Understanding what your organization's risk appetite is. And it might be, we don't care. This is in our OR and there's nobody that's going to get near it. The OR has its own network that doesn't talk to anybody and we feel pretty secure. We're happy to have quite substantial numbers of legacy technologies in there and no one's ever going to be able to make that an issue. It could be that, oh my gosh, somebody came up, new physician, graduated med school and medical device manufacturer, handed them one of these Bluetooth ultrasound probes and said, here, you can be like Lucy from Peanuts and do psychiatry for 5 cents on the side of the road. You can do ultrasounds for 5 cents on the side of the road. Just hook it to your smartphone and you can take these pictures. Maybe there's a person like that who's been hired by your organization, fresh out of school, free thing they want to bring in, and they walk into your OR. Well, now suddenly you've got competing agendas. So stop and thinking about how much risk you can handle and which devices you're going to allow in your environment and where they come from, right? Again, discussed in here. This is all, we want you to read this paper. It took us 3 years, please. It's free, you can download it. How do I manage the risks of things I currently have? And we talked about that a little bit. And my organization is having trouble with certain challenges. How do I don't know, how do I assess whether I can or maybe should connect technologies to my network? They might not have been designed for that purpose. So there are old machines out there that were never designed to be on the network that still run great. What if you were to add a network card to them and suddenly you could record all kinds of data? You're changing the functional capabilities of that device, and you technically become the manufacturer once you change the capabilities of the device. So if something were to happen, you might be liable. What if you want to understand how and when I may be able to leverage third-party support providers, right? Well, a lot of the ecosystem for service of equipment is based around, risk mitigation, and the rest of it's based around cost mitigation. So there are some substantial savings to be found with third-party service providers. Is that something that you're going to be able to do and still address latest technology? There have been concerns raised. I'm concerned that if you guys don't have the manufacturer doing your service, you might not get patches on time. Safety patches are provided free and are mandated. So yes, but how do you determine if a different service vector might be better for your organization? Also covered in here. What about, I want to understand and effectively use S-bombs. Whole chapter, knocking them out of the park. Or understand the benefits and risks that third-party components may pose. Again, we talked about those network interface cards, right? They can have a stack in there that allows the appropriate bad actor to go in and leverage some of the data that's stored on the network card, as opposed to having to do some crazy hacking past user credentials and so on.
A quick question.
Yeah, man.
Categories of risk. To me, there's a little, as you talked about, so there's a business risk as well as a patient risk.
Yes.
So you categorize them as two different things and how to handle them, because sometimes they're opposite of what you think.
They are. And patient care is the way we look at it. So we're not looking to put patients. Okay. So that I kind of think is a default, but yes, very, very much understood. A lot of organizations will claim that there's a patient risk when in fact it's a revenue protection strategy.
Is there a distinction when you add, going back to the part of the legacy device, is there a distinction between middleware, so you're collecting now data for your EMR, so you have in between box that ties serial, but the whole parts 232, but then now ties into the network through that box. Is there a distinction?
So there are a lot of smart people out in the world, and most of them are smarter than me. There is a paper written by the FDA that steps you through blocks on how to make that determination. I would refer you to their guidance on medical device servicing. Type into Google medical device servicing FDA. They've got a paper published with a real nice flow chart that talks you through, does it do this, does it do that, therefore it is, therefore it's not, and it helps you make a really good choice. I was that a lot, but that wasn't this presentation, so let me refer you to that.
So does that cover definition of changing device from the FDA standard? Adding a here?
Yes, that guidance covers that. Again, point you to the FDA. They care about their stuff. I am not here to speak on behalf of the FDA. We are here to advise HHS though. This wasn't for advice for HHS. So I want to make smart, risk-informed decisions whether I should replace the technology. I mean, I think I've got a nuclear camera that isn't used hardly ever, but it's running XP. Oops. There are devices that sometimes you keep because they still provide the clinical service they were purchased to provide. And replacing them really doesn't make any sense. So either you could take them offline, and then all of that patient population they serve has to go somewhere else to get care, or you leave them online and add risk mitigating protections. So should I replace this thing or not? Big part?
Portable electric machine of XP. Yeah. 10-year-old throw a thumb drive in it. It's sitting out in the hall under security. Guess what? Now you're patient. Put it in.
They make physical USB port blockers. I would advise you. They're very inexpensive, but yes, but very much point taken.
And with a simple key, you can remove just that quick.
Yeah, very much so. Or if it's got a laptop as a component of that device that's portable in the hall, some people just walk up and walk off with that laptop. You were to put on a shirt that said some company on the pocket, walked into a facility, how hard would it be to get a computer, pretend you're the service person to pick it up and walk out?
That's why they call it risk mitigation and not risk elimination.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. So, but a lot of those devices you could also secure with like a security cable. Your IT field service support shop probably has security cables for laptops. They're not terribly expensive. They're easy to install. And that, again, lowers that risk, right?
I think a lot of people forget about this. Yeah, I think a laptop, ultrasound stove, and so we literally talk about putting devices behind locked doors and people want some central safe.
Yeah.
There's a computer, somebody can steal it. Yeah, in our CMS, we get that checked.
Yeah. Physical security is the thing. Because people can put on a hat and shirt, the name on it, and just walk in. I mean, what is it? Best Buy and some of the big box stores right now, they've actually got policies that say if someone is shoplifting, don't confront them because they could be violent. And they, for the last 12 months, they've seen this huge rise in theft in big box stores. And so in the last week, they started to develop policies of how do you address shoplifting and minimize that without putting your employees at risk trying to confront people who are stealing things. So physical security is very much a thing. How do you make risk-informed decisions to make sure that the device needs to be changed? One of the most unique parts of this paper we published was something called a responsibility transfer framework. And I proposed this to Advocate 3 years ago, and it wasn't shot down immediately. And the idea is you own a device. You've sent an employee to training on how to service the device. Training with the manufacturer. The device gets to be end of life into support. Manufacturer doesn't want to touch the device anymore. What if you said, I will not hold the manufacturer responsible. Manufacturer sell me a permanent license key and all the technical documents. Sell it to me. Don't give it to me for free. Sell it to me. But I want to purchase a permanent license key. I want to purchase all technical documents. And since I'm factory trained, I'll maintain it myself and waive responsibility for the manufacturer to take care of it. I've had 2 major manufacturers say, done. Sign here though. And sent it to risk and legal, and they went totally. So there's a way to move from completely supported by maybe the manufacturer to taking on some of that risk on your own while it's supported before the end of life into support. So what do you do after that line in the sand, end of life into support? Well, there should be a way to do all that. And that's laid out at a high level, what I just described with factory training, purchasing support documentation, and then making sure that there's a legal binding agreement between the organizations, right?
So how does that adapt to policies? So
Beg your pardon?
how does that adapt to the IT policies for?
Carefully.
Maybe there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, so there's exception documentation that has to be filed, and every year stop and check up line and make sure the device is still something to be supported and yes. Good question. It does get sticky. SBOM stuff. We'd love to comply with new requirements. There's executive orders, there's FDA rulings, there's that omnibus document that you don't want to read that talks all about it. What if you're being required to use, produce, if you're a manufacturer, consume, if you're trying to follow the guidance from the last revision to the High-Tech Act, which said if you're actually doing as good as you can for cybersecurity and you can document it and prove it, you don't have to be fined if there's a breach. You can be fined, but you don't have to be fined. And like $500 a patient record with like 70,000 records on an ECG, fines can get pretty crazy with just 1 or 2 devices. So if you're following best practices, maybe you're compliant with NIST cybersecurity framework. Maybe you document how you're compliant with that in your CMMS. Then, if there's ever a breach, you don't have to be fined. Well, how do you make sure that you're using SBOMs appropriately to maybe also further comply with cybersecurity framework and therefore avoid potential fines down the road? This document covers how you can start to get to some of those points, right? In fact, on page 22, 23. What if I want to support customers in managing technologies so that they don't become legacy as long as possible? Let's just patch it all. Patch. You'll have a lot of people in the space that tell you patching is the answer. Period in the conversation. There are probably 4 or 5 vendors in the trade hall that say micro segmentation is the answer. I think there's probably some combination of 3 or 4 solutions, not one or the other, or some middle ground. I think the one that I like the most lately has been network traffic control. Instead of putting black box firewalls by devices or trusting the firewall on the outside, if I tell the switch in the closet, don't let anything talk to that IP address except for this IP address and this IP address, whitelisting on a switch level, that's one of the best that I've seen currently. But how do we support and make sure that people aren't just saying patch, because maybe that's not the only solution. I talked a minute ago about should you replace equipment. Last year, 1 in 5 rural hospitals closed because they couldn't afford to keep the doors open. 3 out of 4 hospitals last year operated in the red. So financial strains are a big piece of that. You all are here today is amazing because there's a lot of organizations that aren't allowing travel. A lot of these concepts speak to how do we control some of the runaway costs of healthcare? How do we make sure that we don't add additional patient risk, financial risk, or otherwise? When we're coming to understand and dealing with and addressing legacy technologies. Maybe you've got a specific thing that, really has you jazzed up. I want to ensure that I understand and am prepared for and know how to deal with my technology as it ages. Not ageism, but just as the device gets older. What do you have to do? Maybe there's covers you have to replace because wiping them with PDI wipes corrodes the plastic and they're going to break and become brittle. Maybe there's other things though. Maybe there's components on that network card. Maybe there's software entities like Adobe. Oh my gosh, take Adobe off of your machines. It's got so many problems with Adobe. With Bluetooth. Maybe Bluetooth is something that you've got going on, but a lot of the older versions of Bluetooth are severely compromised. NIST, the National Institution Standards Organization, NIST has a National Vulnerability Database, NVD. So if you're ever curious, does something in my machine have a vulnerability? You guys should look it up on the NVD and it's published. People trying to hack your organization, they're looking things up on the NVD, looking for opportunities. And they're all rated, scale of 1 to 10. 10, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I'm not just checking little things are bad. 1, it's a problem, but you know what? As long as you turn off your computer once a year, it's not going to be a big problem. So ranked from 1 to 10, the NVD will actually help you understand a lot of those risks that are out there. You can Google that NVD and it'll give you the URL. Maybe I'd like to make it easy for my customers to identify, track, and manage technologies in their environments. Wouldn't it be great if every CMMS did that? Wouldn't it be great if every CMMS had certain fields that you could populate that really spoke to that? Well, how do you make sure that you're tracking those things from cradle to grave as technologies come into your organization? How do you make sure that you're doing that leveraging some of the power of our CMMS to kind of get that visibility to avoid some of those risks. Again, tells you how to do it. These are some best practices that are out there. So I'm getting a little close on time, so I'm going to speed up the next one. I'd like to design, deploy, maintain secure and secureable technologies. Talked a little about this at the beginning. How do you design stuff that it's going to be secureable? How do you maybe the risk transfer? Say to your customer as a manufacturer, please supply a machine that does X, Y, and Z. We will only supply the technology of the software. So maybe we want to spin up a virtual server, maybe we want to use AWS Cloud, whatever the partnership looks like between organizations. This can be something that you spell out, that you can actually address and make sure that you're not just designing things that at a moment in time they're a snapshot, and then 18, 14 months, 3 years, 10 years down the line, they become a legacy technology. You can collaborate between all the members of the ecosystem that takes care of equipment to maintain and secure technologies, to design and deploy them in a way that's cost effective for patients. Right? I know that firewalls seem to be one of those things lots of folks take a picture, I'll back up. Firewalls are one of those answers that a lot of people put out there as how do you address that? And there are some devices that use firewalls locally, like oncology equipment. There are some oncology devices that have local firewalls just between this machine that's almost half as big as this room. There are other devices that are less complex, but they require maybe a physical interaction. You can't get to the network or the settings on this device until you manually manipulate a switch. So physical protections. Lots of things that are discussed in here. I want to get to the end in case there are any questions.